this week. Alberto today, some folks from the Congressional Budget Office tomorrow, and then an AMA with me on Thursday to finish it up. I don't know if anyone will show up for that, but we'll see. So as always, there's no real agenda for this. It's just a conversation. Alberto and I will start chatting about whatever. We have plenty always to talk about.
The weather, we can talk about the weather. It's super cloudy in Miami. It's completely unacceptable these days.
So finally, the weather in Miami and DC are the same because it's cloudy and rainy here. If you have questions, there's only about 20 of us. I'm sure more will roll in. But if you have questions, you can put them in the chat window, or you can just unmute yourself, put your camera on, and just ask Alberto directly. Alberto, I don't know. I don't have, like I said, I don't have. Well, let me just say one last thing before we start. So obviously we are in a even more stranger time than we were just about a week and a half ago. Mm-hmm. I hesitate to want to talk about, or hesitate to steer this conversation to what is happening in U.S. cities right now with mm-hmm. regards to police brutality and inequality in the country. But if people do want to talk about that, I'm more than happy to talk about it. I think we'd probably prefer to stick with data and the data visualization side of maybe that conversation.
I don't think that we can really do that. I don't think that we can.
And I'm certainly not the person. A white male is not the person to do that. So
me neither. But we cannot steer away from that conversation. Right. Probably it happens to you. In the past 2-3 years, I received complaints from followers in social media saying, why don't you stick to data visualization instead of sharing your political views? And I said, you cannot really do that. And that's, first of all, it's my social media account, so I do whatever the hell I want with them.
Right, that's right.
And
if you don't want to follow me,
exactly. If you want to unfollow, just go ahead. So it's like, and you don't dictate what I can do with my social media account. Right. But not only that, it's like I see the worldwide that we do as extremely closely connected to the realities that surround us. You cannot abstract data or visualization from the realities that surround you. Right. You cannot really do that. And if you have an opinion that is based on evidence of what you are seeing, right, that's collecting evidence, that's collecting data. You need to express what your conclusions are. So I don't see any difference between, I don't understand that attitude of, let's focus just on graphics. Talking about graphics these days seems quaint and inappropriate even. Yeah. Considering everything that is happening, right?
Yeah.
So if if you can focus on projects that are related to either to the pandemic or related to inequality or related to ethnic or racial inequities, etc., and you can contribute actively to those kinds of projects, I would strongly encourage you to do that and to fight against police brutality, against looting, against violence, against anything that is related to voter suppression. All those things are going to be really relevant in the months to come, and we can all volunteer a little bit of work. The reason why I was involved in this project that I was mentioning before, and I got sucked in, is because it's a project about the pandemic in Latin America, which is an undercover issue at the moment. So I contributed countless hours to that project, not getting paid, just, it's a bunch of researchers, everybody's working on it pro bono, just because considering how bad the situation is right now, particularly in Brazil, right? Yeah. Where Brazil is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I mean, the president over there, if we believe that the situation in the US is bad, you don't want to move to Brazil right now, particularly with the current federal leadership over there, which is it's absolutely dreadful. So yeah, it's a research project talking about cases of COVID-19, reduction of mobility, adoption of policies to fight the pandemic, and the researchers are gathering a lot of data. And then I helped a little bit visualizing the data, creating several static visualizations, and probably will tweet out a few of them that I created manually, essentially through R and Adobe Illustrator. And now we are in the process of transforming those visualizations into D3 visualizations with the help of a couple of visualization designers. So that's an example of, I think, something that we should do more, perhaps. It's like contribute to time. If you cannot contribute money, try to contribute time. If you cannot contribute money and time because you have a big family to maintain and you need to just spend your entire day working, that's perfectly fine as well. But if you have time off, just try to contribute it. I mean, the situation deserves it. You cannot isolate yourself from society.
Yeah. So I think I know how you're going to answer this question, but let me, because you and I have talked about, we did a podcast together, well, now it feels like years ago, but it's probably just like a few weeks ago, on people creating visualizations around the pandemic who are not experts or even really knowledgeable about public health or epidemiology.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you approach, I'll make this a general question, I think. So how do you approach when someone comes to you and says, can you help us with this product or, project on such and such? How do you approach it when you have no expertise in that particular field?
Well, I try to collaborate only with people whom I trust. And so this group is basically researchers from the University of Miami and in collaboration with Brazilian and Mexican researchers from several really large research universities. So I trust them essentially. Yeah. I cannot assess the quality of their data. I can just help identifying perhaps glitches in the data. And I did. I detected several little inconsistencies in the data while I was visualizing it. And actually I use that as an excuse to explain to statisticians, this is why you need to visualize your data. This is what visualization is useful for. It's just, it helps you not only communicate the data, but also explore it and detect possible problems or glitches in the numbers that you are collecting. When someone approaches me out of the blue saying, hey, I have this project over here and, can you give me a hand or whatever? I try to just look into who they are and their past record. And I have a personal policy, which is to simply ask directly, is this for-profit or non-profit? If it is for-profit, whatever, I just forget about it. I don't have time. If it is non-profit, if it is a non-profit, then I just donate my time. So it's like I cannot devote time to develop visualizations the same way that I'm doing with this COVID-19 project in Latin America, which I can do because it's a big collaborative research project over here. Therefore, I devote time to design things. But when it's a non-governmental, non-profit organization that is developing a visualization product about X, whatever, if I see that it has societal value and the purpose is non-profit, and I think that it can benefit people in any way, I am always happy to jump into a Zoom call with whoever requests it, navigate the project, and give some quick UX visualization, human-computer interaction advice. Just my opinion about whatever it is that they are designing. I really enjoy doing that kind of work because it resembles what I do in my classes, right? Students send me their projects and then I give them feedback, direct feedback, one-on-one all the time, and that's really nice.
You mentioned using R and Illustrator a couple minutes ago. Are you finding that there are other tools, especially now with all of us, sequestered at home? Are there other collaborative tools that you started using that maybe you weren't using 6 months ago?
No, not really. I have not had the time to just. I finished the pandemic hit in the middle of the semester. Then I needed to close the semester. Then I feel that we are all living in a permanent Zoom meeting from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. I simply don't have time to learn. And I this, I mentioned this to you. I was planning to take an entire year sabbatical beginning in May. I changed my plans just because, the situation deserves it. There's so much to do that I know that if I took the sabbatical right now, my brain will be fully occupied with everything that is going on. I can simply not abstract myself from reality. So, I sent an email to my dean saying, let's think about it in 2021. But I was planning to spend the entire summer, this summer, writing my new book, and then just learning more R, which is I have waited for years to being able to sit down and actually learn it really, really well. Because right now I just learn it piecemeal by just copying and pasting like pieces of a puzzle, pieces of code that I have scattered all over different projects without any sort of systematicity to it. So I wanted to learn about that. You know how it is, right? Yeah. That's a fun way to learn, but it also creates vices in your work that you want to avoid. I want to learn things more systematically. Yeah. And then some JavaScript and D3. I feel sometimes that my hands are tied just because I cannot create interactive graphics the way that I would like to. Right? So I still have the same tools that I always had. I use R, I use Illustrator. In this particular project, it was mainly R to generate the base graphics, bring them into Adobe Illustrator, and then style them. I can actually show you a few of them. I have them open over here.
Let me make you a
make me a co-presenter and co-host.
There you go.
I don't know whether I have my crazily unorganized R code anywhere, but I can also show that to my embarrassment because it's really primitive. And then what all right, so let me see if I can just bring any of these graphics on. Yes, control click there. All right, so this is the R code. Yeah, I'm getting a warning sign, but all right, so share screen. So this is my R studio, right? So we are doing graphics about the drop of mobility, right? This is the zero baseline, meaning normal mobility, state by state. These are the states of Mexico. So every line is the drop in mobility in terms of percentage change. So some states, the mobility of people in those states have dropped almost 100%, right?
Wow.
So basically what I do is to generate these graphics in R through very primitive, very basic ggplot2 code. And then I export this as a PDF, and then I bring it over to Adobe Illustrator to style those graphics. Let me see if I can show you one of the, maybe this one. This is one of the graphics that I generated through R and then styled in Adobe Illustrator. This is not mobility. This is what is called a policy adoption index. How many public policies to fight against the pandemic have different countries adopted, right? The higher you are, the better off you are. As you can see, Mexico and Brazil are really low in that public policy adoption index, which is the metric that this research group created. They aggregated a lot of measures and they came up with this index. And then I created this sort of array chart or lattice chart with each state separately. All that was done basically in R, right? And
I was going to ask, did you build that as a facet and then bring it over?
Yeah, I did it as a facet, but then I bring it over to Illustrator and then I style it. I added the colors in Adobe Illustrator. And another one that I have been working on, well, and the graphics are in 3 different languages because this is a trilingual website.
Oh, right.
So I translated them to English, to Portuguese. And another one that we are working on at the moment to make it interactive is this one over here. Let me show you the Brazil one because it's pretty interesting. I'm not going to show my desktop. That would be too embarrassing. It's so chaotic right now.
That is the worst part about sharing is you're sharing.
No, you share everything. You share your life. And
final, V2, final.
You know, and people who say, oh, you know, this guy has written books. He must be sort of like a genius. And people see that you are actually as sloppy as anybody else.
That's right.
No more. Anyway, so this is a scatter plot that I just designed literally, last night. And then we are going to make it interactive at some point because we are using these static graphics as mock-ups for the interactive.
Yeah, right.
So each dot is a state in Brazil, and then we have the public policy adoption index and then the mobility reduction index. This was generated with Stata because in this case, I didn't get sent the data, I get sent the graphic. But obviously the original graphic was dreadful. It looked terrible, right? Man. So I changed it, but it's fine. I asked them to send me the vector PDF, the vector PDF, and then I styled them. I added the background colors, and then I added these annotations for people to understand the quadrants of the scatter plot, right? Higher public policy, higher mobility reduction, and so on and so forth. So I added all those annotations by hand. If there are any questions about the color palette, by the way, I'm not in love with this color palette, but these are the corporate colors from the University of Miami, which I don't love.
Right.
Green and orange.
So, green and orange, right?
Yeah, green and orange. I don't like that color combination. But anyway, you gotta do what you gotta do, right?
Every day you go to school and you're just like, oh.
Yeah, you're like, well, I was not in love with the color palette of the university that I used to work for many years ago, UNC Chapel Hill, which uses this sort of like pastel, very light blue, Carolina blue, as they call it.
Carolina blue, right?
Yeah. I love Chapel Hill, and I love UNC, and I love UM, obviously, University of Miami, but I'm not in love with corporate colors from anybody. I wish that I could use my own color.
Can you, for that scatter plot you just showed, you had these very simple pieces of annotation in each of the quadrants, which is, I think a pretty... it's just a simple approach, but people just don't use it a lot. So I don't know if I have a question here, but maybe when you've thought of it, when you're talking to people and teaching people about how to use annotation, like what's the thing that you tell people?
For many years, we've been taught that, as visualization designers, the image should speak for itself, right? It's like try to reduce, and I was accused several times that my graphics have too much text. And I said, no, it's not too much text. Just leave it be. Redundancy is good. If there is a point that you don't want people to miss, don't let them miss it. Show it, talk about it, mention it, highlight it, and add an annotation about it, right? Put it in the title, put it in the intro, put it here and there. That type of redundancy is extremely important because people are busy and people are distracted and people are, absent-minded, and sometimes we miss the point of a chart. So if you don't want people to miss the point of a chart, just add the annotation. So I'm a huge fan, not only of the annotation layer, obviously, adding little, but actually of, I'm a fan of repeating in the text what the graphic is actually showing. Yeah. And I've been talking a lot about this lately because adding an explanation of what a graphic is showing is not only useful to reinforce what the chart is showing, although it's useful for that, but that's not the sole purpose. The second purpose is that it can also help people who don't know how to read that type of chart, a scatter plot, for example. These types of annotations help a lot. It's like the more you're here, the more you have. The more you're here, the more you have. That sort of explains the grammar of the graphic. So it's useful to explain the content of that particular graphic, but it's also useful to expand the literacy of the reader who's reading it. So I'm a huge fan of annotations and text that repeats what the graphic is saying because of two reasons. And there's a third reason, which is one of the reasons why that I have been talking about in recent talks related to my future book, which also increases accessibility. If a visually impaired person access your graphic, they will not be able to see your graphic. But the alternative text that you write, right? And I wish that I would have had the time to write alternative text for the graphics that I created very quickly in the past couple of days for this new website, right? And we will do, right? The alternative text, what we'll do is computer readable. So a visually impaired person who cannot see your graphic can still get the text read to them so they can still visualize the data in their minds. So it serves three different purposes. So long live text. I mean, just bring the text on, add more text. Obviously, don't overwhelm your graphics. You don't want to clutter your graphics, right? There's always a trade-off and balances, but that's extremely important. The old saying, the Malofieck name of the workshop, show, don't tell. I really don't like that because it sort of like conveys the wrong idea. We need to both show and tell. Show and tell.
I had a question and now I lost it. How do you approach writing your alt text for your graphs? It's something that we've been talking about a lot.
I just verbalize what the graphic is saying. So whatever comes to my mind, I try to verbalize it in a way that makes sense, writing short sentences. That's what I write. And I usually encourage, whenever I teach visualization, I actually encourage the students to begin not designing anything, but but verbalizing what it is that they want to say. Right. That's your alternative text. So it serves you not only to make good choices when you're going to design the graphic, to emphasize what you want to emphasize, but it's also the text that you may use as an introduction to the graphic that you're about to present. So that's what I do. Yep.
Nice. I'm just going to ping everybody. If they have questions for Alberto, feel free to put them in the chat box or just...
or just unmute yourselves. We are a small group.
It's fine. It's fine. Okay, so I want to give you a chance to talk about your new book. But I also wanted to ask you about teaching. So, first off, is Miami going virtual in the fall? Have they said yet?
I have no idea. It's all in the air. All to be all to be decided. Yeah. I am going to prepare though. I'm going to spend. That's one of the things that I need to do over the summer, which is I already have a lot of materials that can be used in online teaching just because I use the split classroom model. So whenever I teach the software, I don't teach it in the classroom. I have video tutorials that the students use. So I will just record my lectures, plan for Zoom meetings, have activities that can be easily made online and then share online and stuff. So I will prepare for that because eventually it may happen that we will go at least partially online. And my classes are very easy to teach online. As long as I can talk face-to-face to students like we are doing right now, and share screens to give feedback on projects, they can be taught online. And actually, I like staying at home. I like avoiding my commute. The only downside is I don't see the students in person, which is also something that I really, really love.
Right. So you don't see, for your classes, you don't see having to make any major changes to how you're going to, how you would teach?
No. As I said before, I can adapt very, very easily, which is not the case of other classes. For instance, in the interactive media program where I teach, we also have classes on physical computing. How do you teach that? To build machinery and stuff? How do you teach that virtually? Yeah, virtual reality and augmented reality. How do you teach
Yeah.
that? Or
Yeah.
or video production, video shooting
Right.
and production. You cannot teach it
Yeah.
online.
I mean, no, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question here for you in the chat
Mhm.
window.
Oh yeah, I'm reading it.
Um,
So it's from Michal or Mihal. Sorry, I mispronounce names all the time, so I apologize. Do you conduct research how well people are extracting information from your graphics? If so, how? How much information they get from it, and if it is correct, how much they remember in 1 week? Well, I don't consider myself a researcher, although I'm involved in several research projects. I am more of a practitioner. I teach the practice. I am involved right now, though, in another research project that is looking into whether representing data as units is better than representing data using masses of color, like the isotype approach versus the traditional approach, right? Bar graphs versus units. And I'm collaborating with that project with several other researchers, but we don't have any conclusions yet. So I cannot share anything right now. Basically, the way that you do it is through experiments. So you create the alternative graphics, right? And then you divide your subjects into different groups, and then you expose them to the graphic. And then you can do either like a formal survey, asking them formal questions about the graphic. How bigger is this compared to that? What do you estimate that the size of this thing is compared to that other thing? Or you can do it more, which is my preferred approach. You can do it more, so to speak, ethnographically. So it's like having conversations with people. What did you learn from this graphic? And then you can code their answers. So I have seen both things done, right? The more quantitative survey-driven approach in which you ask people questions, and that is fine. But I am a fan of mixed methods. So you can do that, the quantification part, but you can also do the qualitative research, which I'm a fan of. We are doing that more in another research project that I'm involved in about how people misread and what we can do about it. Hurricane forecast maps, which is one of my pet peeves. I've been involved in this project for a couple of years already. And we are using both a quantitative and qualitative approach to these other things. So we have done a lot of like interviews, we have done focus groups. And what you do in those cases is to transcribe the results of those conversations, and then you start looking for commonalities in the answers to those questions, and you start creating sort of like a mental map of the main issues through the answers that people give to your questions, or through the way that they explain what they see, because the question may be an open-ended question. It doesn't need to be a direct question. It could be said, you saw this graphic, right? Describe to me what the graphic is showing, and have them express verbally the content of the chart, right? The answers can be quite revealing, but you need to find the patterns. Obviously, you need many answers. And then you find the commonalities, you find the common sentences, the common themes, the common words, and you create a sort of like a map of the situation. So qualitative research methods are also, in my opinion, quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that's all right on. I mean, I think one of the big questions, right, in the data viz field is how to measure impact. I mean, there's memorability, which is one question, and then there's impact, which I just think is.
I have no idea. You first of all need to define what it is that you're going to measure, right?
Right.
So what do we mean by impact?
Right.
Do we mean people changing people's minds about something, right? In which case you would need to sort of like do a survey to see what their existing opinions are, and then you would need to survey them 1 month later after being exposed to the graphics to see whether their opinions stay the same. Right? Again, that can be done through survey methods, or it can be done qualitatively, having a conversation first, and then having a conversation sometime after they have seen the graphics. And again, you see the commonalities. The challenge with this type of research, though, is that you need, a substantial time to conduct it. And your sample sizes cannot be enormous, because if you want to conduct, non-structured interviews like these, right? You have conversations with people. If your sample size goes above 30 people, that's a huge amount of work. huge amount of work. I did that for my PhD dissertation. I interviewed more than 30 people, if I remember well. I couldn't conduct the interviews myself. I hired, people who I gave them the sort of like the questionnaire, and I trained them and I guided them and so on and so forth. All right. And then I hired someone to transcribe all the responses. And I ended up with this corpora of text, which was literally hundreds and hundreds of pages. And I needed to manually code. I spent months just manually coding and finding the commonalities of the themes in all the answers in order to create a conceptual map of the situation that it was exploring. So it's extremely time consuming. And so there's a trade-off between sample size and the methodology that you can use. If you want bigger sample sizes, surveys are much easier because you can just get 3,000 or 4,000 people on whatever platform you use to conduct the survey. But if you do the more qualitative and granular individual level research, sample sizes are necessarily smaller.
But it's also interesting, especially in the data viz field, a lot of those surveys, even when they use like something like Mechanical Turk, they still only get, because it's expensive, right? They still only get, 100 or 200 people, which is just still not that big.
Well, we did one for the hurricane project with more than 3,000 Floridians. Yeah. It took a lot of time. It was expensive, but it was worth it. We got very interesting results out of that. Expected results though, but we got a few, interesting tips in the sense of we were able to subdivide, facet the sample by age group and by culture, educational level, and so on and so forth. And there are several quite nice insights that we extracted from it. But it's not, I am a little bit skeptical of all those sorts of methods when it comes to evaluating something as subjective as impact. Yes, it's like, how do you measure impact through a survey? I have no idea whether that can even be done. I'm talking bullshit here, and there's a researcher out, I measure impact through a survey, but I have not seen anything that convinces me that that is even possible. But changing minds, that can be assessed through qualitative methods.
Right, and I think it might have been Evan Pack who did a study on that, where he showed people. He asked their political affiliation, and then he showed them graphs and saw if they changed their minds. I mean, I think that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if you were going to say,
I mentioned that research in Howchat's lie, in the conclusion of Howchat's lie. Yeah. That research comes more from the world of political science, finally, not from the world of visualization.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That's right.
Public health, for example, public health, the medical sciences, and political science are areas that are conducting visualization-related research that the visualization community sometimes is not even aware of. And that's a funny thing, and it's unfortunate.
Well, it is. I was just having a little conversation with folks about this paper that was testing linear versus log. Which happens as linear versus log. And I'm reading the paper, and it's by, it appears to be a bunch of people in law schools. And there's no reference to the data visualization field
at all. Because they are like, we exclude each other. We don't know about each other. Right. The public health professionals who study visualization, they don't know about the visualization field that even exists as a research field, right? And the other way around, we don't communicate that much with people in the This is why multidisciplinary efforts like this hurricane project thing that I'm involved in, the COVID-19 one that I'm involved in, I think are so important. Also, not only because they benefit society, but also because they sort of like create stronger ties between different communities, so people know what we are working on. By the way, talking about that paper, is it true, as John Byrne Murdoch from the Financial Times say, that they measure whether people can assess absolute numbers from a logarithmic scale? Is that true?
I believe that's what they're measuring, yes.
Well, that is completely wrong. It's like if you measure the effectiveness of a pie chart to conduct comparisons, obviously it's going to perform badly because the pie chart is not designed for that, right? A bar chart is designed for that.
So it's a little, so just so people know what we're talking about, this is, I'll just put the title of this paper in the chat box, and you can
I haven't read the paper. That's the reason why I'm asking.
So I've sort of skimmed it briefly. There are a variety of things problematic with this paper, aside from the fact that their main exhibit is a 3D bar chart. So
I saw that. Yes, that was very funny. With perspective, it's not only that it's 3D; it's that the bars are separated from the background, so it's impossible to compare them.
Another thing that they mentioned, like the last sentence of the paper, and I've been emailing with one of the authors, so just to be clear. the last sentence of the paper is, while our results are robust and significant, we acknowledge that we rely on stated preferences and our sample is not demographically representative. There's no table that says what the demographics of their survey participants are. So I don't know what that means at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, but again, and also the reference list, there's no citations of any data visualization research.
And that is problematic because if it is true, as John Byrne Murdoch mentioned, John Byrne Murdoch, by the way, for those of you who don't know who he is, you can type his name in the chat window, by the way. He's one of the main data journalists at the Financial Times. And he tweeted yesterday that one of the problems with the paper is that what they assess in the paper is whether people can get accurate estimates of total cases through a logarithmic scale. And the point that John made is that that's not what logarithmic scales are for. Right? It's that you're measuring the wrong thing. And the reason why you're measuring the wrong thing is probably because you're not familiar with the world of visualization. A logarithmic scale is not intended to let you see the change of absolute values. It is intended to show you the rate of change, how often a variable multiplies by 2, by 10, by 20, or by 100. And they work really well for that if you know how to read them. That's the challenge, right? That you need to know how to read them. But if you ask people, try to assess the number of cases through a logarithmic scale, obviously I will get it wrong just because that's not what the logarithmic scale is for, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I will read it at some point, this paper, but I don't feel particularly compelled to devote 1 hour of my time today.
Right.
Better things to do.
They are asking the whether the prediction of the value is accurate, the absolute value.
Well, that's not what the logarithmic scale is for. So that's the wrong question. It's like if you have a pie chart subdivided half and then the other half you have tons of subdivisions, that pie chart may be fine because it is intended to show you parts of a whole, and then it's intended you to show that one portion is half and then all the other portions together are the other half. And that's a perfectly fine use of a pie chart. But then if you ask people, try to compare these little portions over here, obviously they will not be able to do it because that's not what the pie chart is for, right? Which, by the way, is one of the main mistakes that historically, I think, visualization research has done, to assume that the purpose of visualization is always to get accurate estimates from data. That's not the case.
Yeah.
Some graphics are good at that, right? Graphics that use as encoding length, height, position, those are the ones who work better for better estimates. But sometimes you don't want accurate estimates. You want just the big picture of the data, right? And then you can use other encodings such as color or area or things like that, or angle, whatever. Those are perfectly fine. So it's the wrong answer to the wrong question, so to speak, right? That's what you will get. And obviously your results will be significant just because people are not able to do it. Of course they are significant. Right?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your next book?
Sure, although that's another thing that I have been just to tell you the truth, we are in a small group over here. One of the things that I have been doing lately to just sort of like clear my brain of all the craziness of the world and COVID-19 and the stress of getting ready for classes and the fact that I had to delay my sabbatical, change my plan, take care of my family, homeschool children, all of it together, was to go back to board games. So I've always been a huge fan of board games and even role-playing games. And so when I was in college, I played a lot of strategic board games and I went back to that. So I have been playing steadily with a group of friends from college, and then another group of friends who are a bunch of statisticians from Denmark. And don't ask me why that's the case, but I have a group of friends in Denmark who work for the University of Copenhagen, who are in the Department of Statistics, and they are board game geeks. And I mean, if you see my desk right now, it is completely covered in books that are completely unrelated to visualization. That's my current desk. It is covered with books about the history of the Western Mediterranean in the 7th century, just because I have been reading a lot about that lately. So the next book, yes, I have a lot of notes for that. I have been working on it a little bit, although I have had to delay it, obviously, with everything that is going on. I gave a couple of lectures in the last couple of days. If you navigate through my Twitter feed, you scroll down a few days, you will probably find links to slide decks that I use in those presentations. The working title of the book is going to be The Art of Insight, to connect with the truthful art. I'm changing the title a little bit to make it more unique, but it's going to include the word art and also the word insight. And it's all a book about how to make choices in visualization. So how to make justified, ethical, and good choices when you design a visualization. So that relates to everything, to what to visualize, how to visualize it, for whom to visualize it, how to make choices in terms of style, how to make choices in terms of encoding. In the past couple of years, I've been going back to reading another one of my, sort of like hobbies, historical hobbies, is the philosophy of ethical thinking, like moral reasoning, right? Mm-hmm. Ethics, the philosophy of ethics. So I read a lot about that many years ago, and I went back into that literature to look for inspiration. Whenever I whenever I write about a visualization, I use visualizations as an excuse to write about something else. So, for example, The Truthful Art is not really a book about visualization. It's a book about epistemology. That's what The Truthful is. The Truthful Art is. And How Chats Lie is not a book about how chats lie. It is a book about how to think better about numbers, right? Through the graphics that we create, right? So I'm going to use this following book as an excuse to talk about ethics and moral reasoning, but through the lenses of visualization, right? So for many years, I think that visualization was taught as a discipline that could be based on rules, right? It's like, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. But that's not the reality that we all experience when we design a visualization, right? When we're going to design a visualization, we make choices. And those choices are based on a dialogue with ourselves, with our own minds, or based on a dialogue with other people, right? So the book is intended to provide sort of like a framework of how to conduct that dialogue with ourselves or with other people in order to give yourself good reasons to do something. And the word reason has a very specific definition in the literature of moral reasoning, right? A reason is basically something that you can develop based on facts, right? A fact may give you a reason to do something or to believe something, right? So when you put yourself in that frame of mind, the frame of mind of reasons based on facts, and then a dialogue that can be guided by reasons, all right? And sometimes reasons compete with each other, and then you need to sort of like reach a conclusion through a dialogue, right? Is when you can design a better data visualization. So it's a book about decision-making in visualization. I'm going to co-write it, by the way, with Alisa Fowers, who is currently working for the Washington Post. She has a wonderful blog, and you can see how wonderful a writer she is. Her weblog is called Data and Dragons, which is a great name for a visualization website. So you should check it out. Alisa is amazing. But we are both frozen right now because Alisa is super busy at the Washington Post, creating beautiful visualizations and writing stories, and I'm super busy playing board games with my friends and taking care of everything at home. And I have not been able to just sit down. But fortunately, my publisher is also frozen, right? So my publisher has pushed the possible publication date ahead. So that gives us more time to work on the book. So my goal is to have it finished by the summer of next year, by the summer of 2021, with the goal of having it published in the fall of 2021 next year. But who knows? It may get pushed to the spring of 2022. We'll see.
Right. We've been playing Settlers of Catan here, me and the two kids.
That's too easy. We play more hardcore board games over here that take like 7 hours. The other day we played one called The Republic of Rome. You should check that out, Republic of Rome board game. So, but don't think, well, your kids may enjoy it because it's a game about backstabbing. So in the Republic of Rome game,
they'll enjoy that.
Yeah, they will enjoy backstabbing daddy.
Yeah.
So each of the players plays a faction in the Roman Republic. So you run a family of senators, right? And you need to vote for policies. You need to persuade senators to join your faction. You need to conduct the policy of Rome. So you need to expand the realm. So you need to collaborate, but at the same time, in order to survive the game, because the game is run over an artificial intelligence that kills you if you don't collaborate. But you need to collaborate at the same time that you build enough strength to later on in the game backstab your opponents. It's a lot of fun. But anyway,
they would enjoy that. Yeah.
Let's go back to visualization.
We're about to start a new game, Seven Wonders, I think.
That's a good one. Yeah, Seven Wonders.
That one's all set up.
Check, and this is one that you can play with the kids. Check one. I tried this one for the first time the other day. Terraforming Mars.
Oh, okay.
So this is amazing. It is a game that was designed by someone who must be an astrophysicist or an astrobiologist or something like that. Someone perhaps who worked for NASA or for the European Space Agency or whatever. And it's based on facts, how you can terraform Mars. And the objective of the game is to terraform Mars, to make plants grow and to bring water to Mars. And it's great. It's a great experience. It's more complex than Settlers of Catan, but it is not as crazily nerdy as Republic of Rome. So it's something in between. It's just accessible for children. And it's a great strategy game. It will force them to think deeply about probability, about numbers. They will need to do a lot of arithmetic to calculate the resources, what they can invest on towards the future. So it's great. It's a great game. Yeah.
My favorite, we've totally gone away from data visualization, which is
sorry about that. We can go back to it.
No, the other game that I like is this game called Acquire, which is an old game, and I don't even know if they make it anymore. Yeah, it's just it's a big grid basically with numbered letter tiles, and you build hotels.
Nice.
And then you buy stock in the hotels, and then you can take over other hotels. It's the same kind of thing of learning, like when do you get majority, how do you invest, so all that stuff. Okay, so I guess there's a little bit of conversation about this log scale going on in the chat box.
I see David Bishop calling me Professor Cairo. maybe cringe a little bit. Alberto is fine. He says that log scales work if you know how to read them, but that is true of any visualization, and that's why also the annotation layer is so important. You remember one of the cases that I explained at the very beginning of How Chats Fly? Public health researchers have discovered that depending on your level of education, there are people who don't know how to read a damn bar chart. Right. And there are reasons for that, because they were never told how to read a bar chart, right? But so let's explain it. Let's not talk down to them, but let's bring them up to speed, right? That's my obsession at the moment. I think that the visualization community, sometimes we focus too much on the latest flashy thing. My coding language, my VR platform to do 3D business analytics graphics. Never do that, by the way, that's crazy. But it's that sort of stuff, right? The new flashy thing, and we pursue it, forgetting that we may be leaving behind a huge mass of people that can be brought up to speed. I mean, I'm a great believer in democratizing data visualization. And the way that we can do this, we contribute with that sort of like educational efforts. Like if you have a graphic, explain it. Remember what Hans Rosling did in his presentations. Well, not about Hans Rosling, right? I talked about this yesterday, showing one of Rosling's presentations. Before he showed his graphics, he explained how to read them. Yeah. Here's an x-axis, here's a y-axis, here's the bubble, the size of the bubble is whatever, the color of the bubble represents whatever. He explained the grammar of the graphic, and then he showed the graphic, right? I think that's the approach that we could all take. And then there's a lot of discussion that I'm reading right now.
Yeah. So Laura wants to know about games to learn data visualization. I have my own.
You have?
But I have to order more, so we sold that.
Well, you have your own card game. Yeah. In which people can learn about chart names, right? Which is
so this is the
I played that one with my kids, and they loved it.
Yeah, it's fun with the kids. I use it at the elementary school.
It's like an Uno game or something like that, right?
You
throw the cards, and then you need to find matches. So it's a fun game. I don't have anything specific about data visualization, but certainly all the games that we have mentioned, Terraforming Mars, etc., Settlers of Catan, etc., they are good to learn how to reason about numbers and how to build an understanding of probability. Settlers of Catan, for example, it teaches you probability just because you need to create that sort of like mental pyramid of probabilities of the roll of the dice, right? Yeah. 7 is going to appear much more often than 6 and 8. 6 and 8 are going to appear more often than 5 and so on and so forth. And children grab that. If you explain it visually, I explained to my children with a pyramid and actually drew the pyramid with the numbers so they understood the probability. So arithmetic, many of these games force you to do mental calculations, sometimes pretty hardcore mental calculations to plan ahead. But if you're invested in the game and you're role playing it a little bit, people get into it and then they don't feel that the math is hard. And that's the key thing. People sometimes believe that math is hard because the way that math is taught is completely detached from people's experience. If we teach it through games, this is one of the crazy ideas that I have for myself in the future if I can live a second life, which is to think about how we can use these types of board games to teach math and probability and statistical thinking. Probably there are many people working on this. Perhaps, again, I'm talking bullshit here. But it's something that sprang to my mind the other day while playing one of these games. This would be great to teach people how. Not only that, you can teach history. So let me show you one of my favorite games. My games are here. Just give me just 1 second. This one over here, and then this one over here, and this one over here. So, all right. You may have seen that I'm wearing a shirt, but also I'm wearing shorts. People only see half of your body.
That's virtual. That's how I also like how your game cabinet is right next to the cocktail cabinet. I think that's
of course it is. The cocktail cabinet is so you need to drink your vodka or your tequila while you're playing.
That's right.
So this game over here, this game is amazing. This is one of the best games that I've ever played. It's called Here I Stand. Now, don't try this at home if you have never played board games. So you need to sort of like build an understanding of board games before you reach this one. Let me show you the map. Take a look at that. It's a huge, beautiful map of Europe during the 14th century. This is basically a historical simulation of the religious wars, of the rise of Protestantism, and then the fight against the Catholic, against the Pope. Each one of the players plays one faction. You can be the Pope, you can be Spain, you can be the Protestants, you can be England under Henry VIII, so you need to kill your wives and try to get children, to make children who will inherit the throne. And then you have the Turkish Empire. So each one of the factions has different interests. And it teaches you a lot of history because the events of the game simulate and replicate what happened in the real world, what happened in history. So you learn about all those events and say, what is this about? What is this diet of worms thing? Let me look it up, right? That's what prompts. I remember when I was much younger, when I was in my teens and I played these kinds of games and I read a term, for example, the diet of worms. What is that? I didn't go online, obviously, because we didn't have Google, but I went to the library and look for bibliography about all these things. I learned a lot of history, a lot of geography, a lot of cartography, right? Thanks to all these crap, thanks to all these things. It's like they prompt you, they sort of like expand your imagination in a way that encourages you to have fun while learning matters that otherwise will be extremely dry. Who cares about all these religious warfare, whatever, right? It's like, who cares about all that in the abstract? But once you put yourself in a environment that you are enjoying the experience, it prompts you to learn. I have another favorite of mine lately. It's called Cataclysm. This is a simulation of World War II, right? A simulation of World War II, quite simple to play. This one is a little bit easier than the previous one. Again, I played a lot of simulations of World War II and World War I when I was in college, and I did a lot of reading related to that, just to get in the frame of mind, sort of like get into the story and enjoy it a little bit more, right? And it prompts you to read, it prompts you to learn. And one of the problems that we have nowadays, particularly with younger people, is that people don't read books anymore. Well, perhaps one way to encourage people to read a little bit more deeply is to use gateway drugs, such as this one, so to speak, right? Anyway, we have questions more related to what we are supposed to be experts on, which is visualization. So we have Scott Klein's early examples. So yeah, that's a good one. So Rob Simon, hey Rob, he mentions that he got a reminder by this conversation about the annotation layer, etc. Hey, I see Rob. Nice background, man. It seems to be very sunny over there.
Thanks. Well, the police helicopters stopped about an hour ago. So
yeah, I've been reading about that. So yeah, it's similar to what Scott. Can you look that up, by the way, John?
Yeah, what Rob, yeah.
So if you search for Scott Klein line graph or line chart, cholera, you will find it. So Scott Klein is the deputy managing editor from ProPublica, and he is extremely interested in the history of visualization in the news. And he used to have, or still has, a newsletter in which he posts examples of historical visualizations in newspapers. And one of the famous ones, one of the most famous ones, the first one that he published actually and wrote about, is a line chart that appeared in a New York newspaper in the middle of the 19th century, showing the number of deaths per week compared to the number of deaths by cholera, for cholera, right? And the caption is a huge caption. The chart comes with a huge caption that essentially repeats what the graphic is showing. Well, there's a reason for that. The reason why they did it probably was that they knew that in the middle of the 19th century, most of the readers had never seen a line chart. Yeah. So if that is the case, you need to explain how to read it. You cannot just show and expect that that will be intuitive. That is one of the main mistakes that we make, that to believe that if we apply good visualization rules, our graphics will be intuitive, right? They may be a little bit more intuitive than if we don't apply certain principles of visualization design, but they will not be 100% intuitive. Therefore, let's strengthen them a little bit with the explanation itself. And that will put also a human face. It's like a person explaining to you what the graphic is showing. Yeah, that's the one.
Yep. Well, I think we're almost at time. So,
oh, really?
I know, right?
I could go on forever. It will be an excuse. It will be an excuse not to jump into my next Zoom meeting. So please, let's continue talking about board games and graphics.
Well, if we had this in the afternoon, we could have played games and had cocktails too.
Well, I mean, if any of you is interested in board games, the way that I'm playing these days is through there's a platform that you can purchase through Steam called Tabletop Simulator. And once you purchase Tabletop Simulator, you can download 14,000 mods, each one of them reproducing quite faithfully the board, the cards, the markers of any game that you can think of. Settlers of Catan is there, Terraforming Mars is there. We have played through that platform. And, and the experience is not that you have a flat screen and then the flat map. No. It's a 3D environment. So you can sort of like move the camera around that, grab the things with your hand. You see a little hand. Wow. You grab it's like it reproduces quite faithfully the experience of playing in person over a board, over a table. Well,
I'm gonna stick with my kids for now, but
you don't want to join the Danish statisticians.
I'm not sure I'm ready. That sounds pretty intense.
It is quite intense. Yeah, they are a fun bunch, though. I mean, I really love them. Anyway, and then my Spanish friends also. But anyway, yeah, we can keep talking a little bit if you want. And
I have another. Now I have to go to do an interview. So,
okay, perfect. Yeah, we all have more Zoom meetings until 7
More Zoom meetings. Yeah. Well, thanks, Alberto.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we didn't even talk about visualization at all.
Thanks everybody for tuning in and coming by. 2 more of these tomorrow and Thursday. So feel free to stop by and say hi. Thanks everybody. Alberto, always a pleasure.
Likewise, my friend.
I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Okay, take care. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Okay, bye all.